Good morning, students. I just wanted to kind of explain to you, obviously, with my absence, that I'm going to be going through this lecture on what we call verb-based writing strategies. And what they are essentially just mechanisms that will help you tighten up the construction of your sentences. I asked you to read those chapters in the textbook about conciseness and exactness. And these strategies that I'm going to give you this morning are going to be more tools to help you read for and give you very specific things to do to tighten up your sentence structure. What we don't want is rambling long sentences. We don't want sentences that just go with lots of words that kind of generally make the point. We want fewer words and we want the exact point. So from my perspective, I want to teach you these strategies, and in order to do that, I'm going to have to share my screen with you. So you're not going to see me for a little while here, but that's okay. We can just walk through the paper together. The screen issue that, or the screen that you're looking at right now, talks about developing a professional voice, but here's the thing: building precision. And these are the 5 main things that I want you to learn and to understand, right? And I'm going to go through these things, one at a time. One thing that you need to recognize is that the verb is the most important element of a sentence. And because it's the most important element, you're probably asking, why is that? Well, when people hear you speak or when people read what you write, they tend to visualize things. And this is what cognitive science does, right? They study this brain activity. And what they discovered over time is that people tend to retain images of action better than they do, let's say, people, places, and things like nouns. And unfortunately, what we've trained ourselves to do over time is that, we've trained ourselves through, speaking to use nouns a lot and to reduce really our focus on those types of actions. So what I want you to do, and here's the reason why, right? Because wordiness, if we give ourselves more words, it gives our brain more time to think about how to process information and how to put other ideas together. So what I'm going to talk about today is how to identify those types of sentences and then how to fix them. And this strategy that I'm talking about here, using verbs instead of nouns as the focus of our sentence, is going to really blend in nicely with this strategy right here, using strong verbs. Because in order to fix these problems, we need to use stronger verbs. So we're going to identify how we do this first, and then I'm going to show you how to employ better strategies for finding those verbs. So if you take a look at this very first sentence, this is, we want you to give a discussion. Obviously here the verb is, right, we want you to give. The action is to give. And the ION word right here is the telltale, where we've taken an action to discuss and we've turned it into a noun, discussion. And here's the problem, is that this is the word that we should be focusing on, right? Discuss. We want this to be our action, but we're actually using this word here as our action. And this isn't an appropriate word because no one's giving anything away. Give means to, change ownership, to hand over for free, right? To discuss is a much stronger verb. So instead of we want you to give a discussion, we want you to discuss. The same thing here, right? When we do your tax preparation, right, you see the ION word, so that's the word prepare, and then here's the word documentation down here, right? And you can see the ION word again. So documentation is a noun form of an action. So we know how to prepare and we know how to document things. So when you take a look at these verbs that we're using here, it says when we do your tax preparation, we use a computer form, right? These verbs, they're English, but they're not strong. They don't show action. So when we look at this sentence, we need you to look at this and say, hey, when we prepare your taxes, we use a computer form to document expenses, or we document expenses using a computer form. Those are the things that I need you to understand. So those are some really good examples. And so my suggestion for you is when you're looking at these exercises and you wanted to, go through these things to learn something, and to reinforce these, look for those weak verbs, right? Here's gave. And when I say weak verbs, I'm going to give you a list of those things in the next few minutes. But, the CEO gave the indication, right? Is he literally stepping down? No, he's not on stairs. And look at these kind of things. If the board asked him to do so, well, I mean, asked is all right, but we could certainly change the sentence to say something like the CEO indicated that he would resign if the board requested it. That would be a better sentence. So think about that as you walk through these other examples down here. What I really want to focus on, right, is the use of strong verbs, because most of us tend to write as we speak, which I've talked about, this isn't going to work anymore. Right? Because we're writing as we speak, we tend to use weak verbs like these, like gave and do and use, right, and give, right, another form of gave. And also, not only will we use those weak verbs, but we'll also use adverbs to add to a verb. So instead of finding one word over here, which is the strong action, we tend to use a bunch of words. So if I'm going to tell someone, that you're running very quickly, why wouldn't I just use the word sprint? If I'm extremely excited, obviously I'm ecstatic. And someone who speaks very clearly articulates their language, right? And take a look at this example up here too. If I ask you to look over a document, am I literally asking you to take your eyes and peer over top of the document? No, that's what that means though. So what we're looking for is literal interpretation of these, of the words that we use. And when you say you want someone to look over a document, what you actually mean is you're asking them to review it. So these are some things that you can be on the lookout for, right? Taking a look at words like look over, just as we looked up here and we said, that he would step down. No one's stepping, no one's looking when we're asking them to, resign or to review. So find the right word, find the actual word that shows the meaning, and give that. What we do, obviously, when we're using this language that's more conversational, we do it because that's what we're training ourselves to do when we speak. And you need to start training yourselves to speak more eloquently as well as write more eloquently. So you need to start thinking about ways to construct your sentences by using these strong verbs and these action-oriented verbs. The good thing about writing is that once you put these words down on paper, you can then go and scrutinize their meaning. And there's the thing about writing, that it's the time. When you speak, you don't always have time to think about those words and think about those, how to craft those sentences. But when you're writing, you put those things down on paper, and then you're actually able to go back and evaluate the actual words that you're using. So if I had any advice for you, right, I'd say, go down here and take a look at some of these sentence exercises, right? If there's a tour conductor out there, let's say you're at Niagara Falls and you're going on a tour, and there's a railing that's protecting people from falling over the cliff, obviously a tour conductor is not going to say, don't lean over the railing, right? A tour conductor is going to command or demand, or he's going to shout, or he's going to, he's going to have some kind of language here that is going to represent urgency and, protecting your safety. Same thing with the sentence down here, right? The painter came quickly down the shaky ladder, right? Well, if he's coming quickly down, give me another word for that, right? He scrambled, he's, slid down the shaky ladder, did something other than came, right? Because came doesn't have a very good meaning. And did he put his brush down in disgust? Obviously not. If he's disgusted, he's going to slam that brush down, or he's going to do something that has, to show his anger. So my point here of all this is be on the lookout for these weak verbs. And what I'm going to hope that you will do is you'll make a list of these verbs, right? And I've got a list of them right here for you, right? These words: make, have, do, come, put, go, see, say, right? And you can look up here and you can see that they're in there, right? All of these words that we're using in these examples are in our list of weak verbs here. So what I would ultimately ask you to do is to take a look at these verbs, and when you find them in your sentence structure, right, to be reconsidering that sentence in order to figure out how to put a more action-oriented verb in there that's stronger and more meaningful. The word have, I just want to spend a few minutes talking about have, because many people are going to use have as a helping verb, right? I have not accomplished a task, or I have accomplished a task. I'm not talking about have as a helping verb. I'm talking about have as a verb unto itself. So whenever you say, you know, the patient has a condition, right? You are literally saying that the patient has gone out for, you know, to own that condition. And even though we say that all the time, right, the focus of that action, right, is not the purpose. If we're writing about a patient's condition, it's not probably that she has a condition, it's that her condition does something to her behavior, or to her, you know, thoughts and feelings. So what we can do is just eliminate verbs like have and shoot right for something that is more meaningful. I need to shift gears now a little bit and talk to you about passive voice. Passive voice is an inversion of the sentence structure. And what we often talk about in writing is creating action-oriented sentences. And when you create passive voice, you're reducing the action, and you're just making your sentences now more convoluted. You're adding words, and you are creating you know, lengthier sentences that don't have specific meaning. So what passive voice does, though, is that, as I talked about with that nominalization problem up above, is it emphasizes the noun instead of the verb. And ultimately, we put in the sentence, in order to do this, a to be verb. Now, to be verbs, and there they are, is, are, was, were, be, and been, they literally create a sense of being, right? A static relationship. We don't want static relationships. We want active relationships. We want dynamic relationships. So when we're talking about creating dynamic sentences, we can't use a word like to be, because to be means to live, or to exist. That's no action. So, I mean, it is an action, but it's not a very exciting one. So when I take a look at this sentence right here, the barn was struck by lightning, I'm talking about one of the most dynamic activities in nature, lightning. So why would I take lightning and put it down here at the end of the sentence? Because lightning is the thing that's doing the acting. The barn is not doing the acting. The barn is being acted upon. So when we look at passive voice like this, I want you to think to yourself, well, when I see that helping verb construction, in other words, when I see to be with struck, or to be with any other verb, right, that's a sign that this is passive voice. So you should be looking at that, and you should be saying, okay, instead of the barn doing the acting, who's doing the acting? Well, lightning is, right? So lightning struck the barn. This sentence is much more powerful because you get the image in your brain of something being struck. Up here, you have a barn standing in the field, and it's passively acting. Same thing here. The ball was dropped by the catcher versus the catcher dropped the ball. So these you can practice, right? The decision was made by management. Here's a very good example of how complicated this can be. When you see a sentence like this, the decision was made by management. First of all, bells should be going off in your head whenever you see was made, were mandated, right? Will be completed. We were assigned. Was ruled. There they are. There's all the passive voices. You need to say who's doing the acting. So in this sentence up here, you can say management made the decision. But this takes us right back to point number one, which was there's the ION word, right? That's a noun that's, a verb is masquerading as a noun. Made is a weak verb, right? We don't want to use that. So we would take a look at this sentence and we would say, instead of management made the decision, we would say management decided, right? And there's that look back over, right? Which is another weak construction of verbs. So as I'm saying this, you can read this sentence and it's English, but it's not good writing. This is what we would consider to be average writing, right? This is a C-level sentence. But if you change the sentence to be management decided to review each bid before awarding the contract, that's an A-level sentence. Much more powerful language, much more specific actions. You can visualize the action with that type of sentence. Now, I do want you to know that sometimes we do use passive voice, right? And sometimes we have to use it when we don't know who is, performing the action, right? The door had been closed before we arrived. In other words, we don't know who closed the door, so we write that. Politicians use it all the time, right? When they don't want to claim, responsibility for doing something wrong, right? When they say mistakes were made and documents were shredded, they didn't say, I made a mistake and, shredded the documents. They kind of de-emphasize the doer of the action here in order to make it palatable for their audience. But what we will probably be using it for is when we're emphasizing the object instead of the actor, because we already know who the actor is. In other words, in scientific writing, we often, or even when we talk about, writing, well, let's say we're writing about literature, we are going to be focusing on what the author does or what the characters do. So it'd be very simple for us to be able to create sentences. Chopin examines this. Chopin demonstrates that. Mrs. Mallard exercises her right to, be free. We have those types of present tense, action-oriented verbs. But after a while, right, you're probably going to get tired, and your sentence structure will get monotonous if you start every one of your sentences with Chopin did this, Chopin did that, Chopin does these other things as well. So after you establish that Chopin is the author and Chopin is the doer of the action, then you can move back to creating more passive constructions on top of that. So once we know who the actor is, then you can start talking or using passive voice, because we already know who the actor is. Just as passive voice subverted the order of the sentence, so does it and there as these irrelevant pronouns. And I want to, to highlight this section today because we're using language frequently, and a lot of you did this in your writing samples that you sent me, is that you're using these words it and there because you are filling your sentences with lots of words and not just getting to the exact words. And so in this situation right here, when we've got this, I mean, we have to look at these words and determine their meaning. Every word in a sentence should have value and contribute meaning to the sentence. And in this sentence right here, there is no prior knowledge required for this job. I'm asking the question, where is there? It doesn't have any meaning. Same thing here. It has been indicated by our analysis. I'm asking the question, what does it refer to? These are pronouns. Pronouns have antecedents. They should have meaning. They should stand for something. If I don't know where there is and I don't know what it is, then I need to get that out of there, right? I need to revise these sentences to remove these words because they are meaningless, right? What we want to do is take this convoluted sentence structure, right? When we were up here in passive voice, we inverted the sentence structure. We had sentences that were, we took, the active voice, which is a subject, verb, object order. And in this sentence up here, we have object, verb, subject order. So instead of having a who does what relationship in here, we have what was done by who. And that is convoluted. And the same thing happens down here, right? When we have these sentences where, you've got this language, there is and it has been in the front end of the sentence, right? We need to think to ourselves, well, who's performing the action? In this sentence right here, right, it's inverted. If I read the sentence accurately, I would turn this around and say, no prior knowledge is there. Or something has indicated our analysis. And none of those things would even make sense. So now when you look at this, you got to ask yourself, well, here's the verb, right? And there's no prior knowledge required, right? Well, who's doing the requiring? Well, there's the answer right there. This job requires only a general understanding. And this sentence down here, it has been indicated. Well, what has been indicated? We don't know. So now we sit there and think to ourselves, okay, here's our verb, indicates. So what's doing the indicating? Our analysis. So our analysis indicates that the new policies will cost millions, right? So when you're doing your drafts of your papers, you can write like this all you want. All I'm saying is that by the time you start revising the essay, you need to set aside some time to strategize to get rid of these, right? There is, there were, it has, it will, it is, right? And here it can be in the middle of a sentence, they can be at the beginning of a sentence, they can be anywhere. Ultimately, you should be on the lookout for to-be verbs. Unless you're talking about a state of being, you should be creating sentences that have strong action orientation. And action orientation is not going to be delivered with a to-be verb. What you need to be able to do is to look for to-be verbs, is, are, was, were, be, and been, and ask yourself, can I revise this sentence and create a more action orientation with that sentence? Get rid of the weak, get rid of the vague, get rid of the inexact. Let's find specific, accurate, and precise communication, right? Put your ideas on paper, scrutinize those words, challenge yourself to build those strong sentences, right? Revise, rewrite. Don't be married to what you wrote. Be willing to throw it out and start over, right? So easy reading comes from hard writing. Clear writing comes from clear thinking made visible. If you are using these types of strategies, you will create stronger, more accurate language that it will make for good writing and for accurate communication. These are the best strategies that I can give you for developing word level issues in your sentence structure. The most important thing that I find is practice. So what I've got set up for you is a quiz on Friday. I'm going to give you a quiz on the major grammatical errors, but I'm also going to give you a few sentences where you can practice doing identifying these problems in your writing and then strategizing ways to correct them. So I'm interested in seeing your responses to those. The major errors is the part that I really will be grading, but I want you to strategize for those sentences and start preparing yourself to be able to revise and edit accordingly. Okay, if any of you have any questions about this, I'm going to be traveling on Wednesday. I won't be available immediately by email. But if you have any questions at any point in time, feel free to send me an email, and I will be available to respond to those as soon as I can get off a plane and get internet access. So on Friday, good luck with your quiz, and if you have any questions about that before the quiz is administered, feel free to ask and let me know if you've got any issues. Okay, folks, good luck with everything, and if as I said, feel free to contact me at any point in time.